Yeah, that's a really great question. I don't know of any, sort of models or consultancy that would, have people come into a community and be able to put in place governance structures that will protect against corruption. I think that we're only just getting started, especially in the UK, but even less in the United States, around what democratic public ownership would actually look like. I think in the UK, because it's being taken up by a major political party, I've been advising the Labour Party. There's a consultation document about some of these issues, about what democratic public ownership would look like, and how do you protect against some of these issues. I think the question of corruption obviously is one that sort of transcends public and private. It's not just public enterprise, obviously. Publicly owned enterprises, this is a big criticism of publicly owned enterprises, especially in much of the developing world, is this question of corruption. I got this question last night about Brazil, especially in the context of the recent elections there, and the corruption scandals there with Petrobras and some of the bigger state-owned enterprises. And it's really a question of democracy. How healthy is one's democracy, and how healthy is how participatory or accountable or transparent is your democratic system, because that's just going to transfer over to whatever type of enterprise that you put in place. So in Germany, for instance, they have the Sparkassen banks, which is a network of publicly owned banks, massive, lots of
savings and loan scandal here.
Yeah, exactly. So, and the publicly owned banks in Germany take along, totally fine. The German political system is, maybe it's more robust, or maybe it has more checks and balances, but I think the point I was going to make is that in the financial crisis in 2008, 2009, all the banks, or many of the banks in Germany, had the same sort of corruption issues, the same sort of fraud issues. They had the same things that happened here. A lot of them had to get bailed out. They went down, so on and so forth. The publicly owned savings banks, the local savings banks, no problems at all. Ticked along just fine. The economists said that they came through the crisis without a scratch. The OECD said that they were as efficient, if not more efficient, than the large German, privately owned banks. So I think it's really a question of the structure that you put in place, and that gets to the democratization question, and how do you put public accountability, and how do you get sunlight on these enterprises and these systems? How do you get people involved in that? And I think that brings in Brazil again, which is quite interesting. So Brazil is also the home of participatory budgeting, or the birthplace of participatory budgeting. Started in Porto Alegre in the 1980s and has since spread across the world. And this essentially allows local communities to take a portion of a municipal budget and to decide what they want to do with it. Usually it's like parks or schools or local infrastructure, roads, and so on and so forth. But what participatory budgeting has shown is that if you give people real power, if you give communities real power, there's actually a hunger to participate. I get this question when I talk about democratization and participation all the time, that I'm sure you get, is socialism just means more meetings, or participation, that's just going to mean more meetings. But participatory budgeting shows that if you give people real power, people don't mind going to meetings. They don't mind making decisions. And you really have to put in place the parameters and the guidelines to help participation happen, and to help democratization happen. So that includes training, that includes, so the Mondragon cooperatives, which I mentioned at the beginning, which are a very interesting model of worker cooperatives in the Basque region of Spain. They have robust training processes for workers who want to go into the management and to own the enterprise, because they don't just assume that workers, frontline manufacturing workers, are going to be able to run a multi-billion-dollar or million-dollar international enterprise. They have to be trained to be able to do that, and so on and so forth. There's also incentive questions. So like in Nebraska and places out west, I think it's either Nebraska or Kansas, when they want to do planning, or they want to have people participate in deciding whether or not they want to have more wind energy, or so on and so forth. People have to drive hundreds of miles, to be able to come and to participate in a meeting. So they have incentives, they pay for hotel rooms, so on and so forth. At Mondragon, you get a case of wine if you go to the general meeting every year, so on and so forth. So, I'm a father of two, so, having childcare, you really have to put in place the things to allow people to participate. And when you do, and you give them real power, people really do, I think, want to participate, and they do.